Hey there, future diplomats. If you're tuning in, well, I'm guessing you're probably prepping for the UPSC, and you've chosen international relations as your optional.
Brave souls.
Yeah, it's a smart move,
It is.
but definitely a challenging one.
Absolutely.
So today's deep dive is going to give you some seriously powerful analytical tools.
All right.
We're tackling Hegelian philosophy, his ideas on war, international relations, and his famous dialectical method.
You know, most people, when they think of philosophy, they think of this abstract, head in the clouds kind of thing.
Right.
But Hegel, this guy's ideas, they're surprisingly relevant for understanding how the world actually works, especially the world of international relations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some of his ideas, I got to tell you, are pretty mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah.
For instance, did you know that Hegel did not see war as simply an absolute evil?
Interesting.
He actually argued that it could be good for the ethical health of a nation.
Really?
I know, right?
That's pretty radical.
Get ready to have your assumptions challenged.
I am, yeah.
Okay, so
It's a provocative statement, for sure. But to understand it, we have to understand Hegel's view of the state.
Oh.
He saw the state as this representing a higher level of ethical unity. You know, a community that goes beyond just individuals pursuing their own self-interests.
okay, so we're talking about the state as something more than just a bunch of people living in the same place.
Right.
It's about shared values, a sense of collective purpose.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for Hegel, war, as terrible as it is, can actually jolt people out of their everyday routines and force them to prioritize the collective good.
Interesting.
Yeah. Think about it. In times of war, people are often willing to sacrifice their comfort,
Right.
even their lives, for the sake of their nation.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point.
Yeah.
It's like the whole, us versus them mentality kind of kicks in.
Totally.
And suddenly individual desires take a back seat to the survival of the group.
Yeah. Hegel even went so far as to say that prolonged peace
Oh, wow.
could actually weaken a nation's ethical fiber.
Interesting.
You know, without these occasional reminders of what truly matters, he worried people might become too focused on their own individual lives and lose sight of the bigger picture.
So a little bit of hardship, even conflict, can actually bring people together and make them stronger as a collective.
Got it.
That's a pretty counterintuitive idea, especially in today's world, where peace is often seen as the ultimate goal.
Right, and that's why understanding Hegel can be so valuable for you as a UPSC aspirant.
Yeah.
He pushes you to think critically, to question assumptions, and to see the world through a different lens.
And it's not like he was glorifying violence or anything.
Yeah.
Hegel recognized that stable states need to move beyond brute force
Absolutely.
to develop that shared sense of values and purpose.
It's true. And, you know, the state has to be founded on something deeper than just the threat of punishment.
Okay.
It needs that ethical core, that sense of shared identity to truly thrive.
Now, here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Hegel actually saw modern warfare, the kind shaped by technology, like guns, as a sign of progress.
Interesting.
I mean, how can that be?
Well, remember, he was writing in the 19th century,
Yeah.
a time of rapid technological advancement.
Sure.
And he argued that the invention of the gun made war more abstract.
Okay.
What he meant by that was, instead of it being about individual strength and hand-to-hand combat, modern warfare was about strategy, logistics, the coordinated actions of large groups.
So in a way, it was about using your brain more than just brute force.
Yeah, totally.
That's a pretty interesting way to look at it.
Exactly. Hegel saw this shift as kind of a step away from the more primal forms of conflict. Of course, whether that's truly progress is debatable,
Right.
especially given the devastating consequences of modern warfare.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
We can appreciate Hegel's insight without necessarily agreeing with his conclusions. But the fact that he was grappling with these issues, trying to understand the nature of war
Right.
and its role in human history,
Yeah,
that's what makes him so relevant even today.
absolutely.
And this leads us to Hegel's views on international relations,
Okay.
which are equally thought-provoking, I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, bring on the next mind-blowing idea.
Well, let's just say Hegel wasn't exactly buying into Kant's whole perpetual peace idea.
Okay,
In fact, he was pretty skeptical of it.
interesting.
You know, he believed that states, just like individuals, inevitably create enemies.
So he wasn't exactly a starry-eyed optimist when it came to international relations.
Not quite, no.
Okay.
He wrote, the state is an individual, and individuality essentially implies negation. Hence, even if a number of states make themselves into a family, this group as an individual must engender an opposite and create an enemy.
Yeah.
So he saw conflict as baked into the very nature of how states interact.
Okay.
Which, let's face it, looking at history, he kind of had a point, right?
You know, he really did. It's like that old saying, power corrupts.
Yeah.
And when you have multiple powerful states vying for dominance, it's hard to imagine them all just getting along peacefully forever.
Right. And that brings us to another one of Hegel's controversial ideas.
Oh, boy.
He believed that there's no such thing as a just war.
Hold on.
Now, before you get too riled up,
Is he saying that all wars are morally the same?
he's not saying they're all morally equal.
Hey.
It's more that he believed every war has its own complex logic and context.
Okay.
Ultimately, the only true judge of a war's rightness or wrongness is history itself.
So instead of applying our own moral standards to wars of the past,
Right.
we need to try to understand them within their historical context.
Exactly.
It's a pretty nuanced perspective.
And that's exactly the kind of thinking that's going to help you excel in the UPSC.
Right.
It's about going beyond simple right or wrong answers and developing a deeper understanding of the complex forces that shape history and international relations.
I'm starting to see why Hegel is considered such a heavy hitter in philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
He really makes you think.
He does.
But before we get too deep into the weeds,
Right.
let's make sure we're all on the same page about his famous dialectical method.
Ah, yes, the thesis, antithesis, synthesis dance.
It sounds a little bit like a philosophical tango.
Yeah.
What's the basic idea here?
Well, it all starts with a thesis,
Okay.
which is essentially an idea or a concept.
Right.
Then comes the antithesis,
Okay.
an opposing idea that challenges the thesis.
Okay, so it's like a clash of ideas.
Yeah, you got it.
A bit of intellectual sparring.
Exactly. But here's the key
Okay.
out of this clash. A new, more comprehensive understanding emerges. The synthesis.
So it's not about one side winning,
Right.
but about a new idea being born out of the conflict.
Right, got it.
So it's like those heated debates you have with your study group, where everybody comes in with their own perspective.
Exactly.
And by the end, you've all learned something new.
Yeah.
And maybe even changed your mind a little.
Right, that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And Hegel saw this process of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis as the driving force behind all historical change.
Okay.
From the evolution of societies to the development of political systems.
I see where this is going.
Yeah.
So how does this dialectic play out on the world stage in the realm of international relations?
Good question.
I have a feeling you're about to blow my mind again.
Just you wait. We'll dive into that in part 2.
All right, cliffhanger. I'm hooked. For all you UPSC warriors out there, stay tuned for part 2, where we unpack the dialectic and how it applies to international relations. Trust me, this is knowledge that can give you a serious edge in those exams. And hey, while you're at it, hit that subscribe button and give us a like. We'll be back with more brainy insights soon.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've got your thinking caps on because we're about to apply Hegel's dialectic to the complex world of international relations.
All right, I'm ready to see how this thesis, antithesis, synthesis dance plays out on the global stage.
Well, imagine the entire Cold War as a giant dialectical process.
Okay.
You had the United States representing capitalist democracy
Right.
and the Soviet Union representing communist totalitarianism.
Okay.
Two completely opposing ideologies locked in a global struggle.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
The U.S. and the USSR were like the thesis and antithesis, right? Exactly, pushing its own worldview and trying to win over other nations.
It wasn't just a military standoff.
Right.
It was a clash of economic systems, political ideas, even cultural values. The whole world was caught up in this ideological tug of war.
So if the Cold War was the clash,
Right.
what was the synthesis? Did one side completely obliterate the other?
That's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Neither side completely triumphed.
Right.
Instead, the Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union, leading to a new world order.
Okay.
Think about it. The end of that bipolar world didn't result in a total victory for capitalism.
You're right. Instead, we saw the rise of a more multipolar system
Exactly.
with new centers of power emerging.
Right.
And new challenges like globalization and terrorism
Yeah.
coming to the forefront.
Precisely. And this new system,
Yeah.
it's still evolving.
Right.
Still being shaped by the ongoing interplay of competing ideas, interests, and power dynamics.
So it's not like we've reached some sort of endpoint.
No.
Things are still shifting and changing.
That's the beauty of the dialectic.
Yeah.
It's not about reaching a final static endpoint. It's about understanding how change and progress happen
Right.
through the clash and resolution of opposing forces.
So Hegel's dialectic isn't just some abstract philosophical concept.
Yeah,
It's a framework for understanding how history actually unfolds with all its twists and turns.
absolutely.
And that's incredibly useful for anyone trying to make sense of international relations.
And for you UPSC aspirants, this is gold.
Okay, tell me more.
Imagine writing an essay on the changing dynamics of global power or the evolution of international institutions
Okay.
by applying Hegel's dialectical approach.
Right.
You can show the examiners that you understand the deeper historical forces at play.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's about showing them you're not just memorizing facts,
Right.
but that you can analyze those facts,
Yeah.
connect the dots,
Yeah.
and see the bigger picture.
It's about demonstrating that you can think like a diplomat, a strategist, someone who understands the underlying currents shaping the world.
I like it.
Yeah.
So the dialectic can be applied to so many areas of international relations.
Oh, absolutely.
Take the rise of China, for example.
Yeah,
You could analyze it as the antithesis to the existing Western-dominated world order.
exactly. China's economic and military rise is challenging the established norms and power structures,
Right.
forcing a rethinking of global governance and international relations.
So what will emerge from this clash?
Well, that's the question we're all grappling with.
Right.
The dialectic helps us understand that the future isn't predetermined. It's shaped by the ongoing interplay of these competing forces.
This is making me realize just how much potential Hegel's ideas have for analyzing current events and making predictions about the future.
It's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
And remember, Hegel wasn't the only one to use it.
Right.
Karl Marx, for example, adapted the dialectic to critique capitalism,
Okay.
arguing that its internal contradictions would eventually lead to its downfall.
Wow, so even critiques of Hegel's ideas
Hmm.
can be seen as part of the dialectical process.
Yeah.
It's like this never-ending cycle of thesis, antithesis, synthesis,
Exact.
pushing our understanding forward.
Now, as fascinating as the dialectic is, we can't forget that Hegel himself was a complex and often controversial figure.
Right.
There are a lot of debates about his political leanings
Yeah.
and the implications of his ideas.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier.
Yes.
Was he a proto-liberal,
Mm-hmm.
a conservative, something else entirely?
Well, on the one hand,
Okay.
he defended individual freedom and recognized the importance of civil society. But on the other,
Yeah.
he saw the state as the ultimate expression of ethical life.
Mm.
And he wasn't exactly a champion of democracy as we understand it today.
So some of his ideas seem to line up with liberal thought,
Mm-hmm.
while others sound a bit more authoritarian.
Precisely. This tension is at the heart of much of the debate surrounding Hegel.
Right.
Did his philosophy ultimately support individual liberty or pave the way for totalitarian regimes?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I can see why people are still debating his legacy even today.
And that's what makes studying him so rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about finding easy answers.
Right.
It's about wrestling with complex ideas,
Okay.
examining different perspectives, and forming your own conclusions.
That's something any UPSC aspirant should take to heart.
Absolutely.
You don't want to just parrot back what you've read.
Right.
The examiners are looking for critical thinking,
Yeah.
for the ability to engage with different viewpoints
Yeah.
and develop your own analysis.
Right. It's about showing that you can think for yourself, that you're not afraid to grapple with tough questions, and that you can apply philosophical concepts to real-world issues.
So while Hegel's ideas might seem abstract at first,
Yeah,
they have the potential to make you a sharper, more insightful thinker,
totally.
which is exactly what you need to excel in the UPSC.
It is.
But enough about abstract theories for a moment.
Right.
Let's bring this back to practical advice for our listeners.
Okay, let's get down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
What can all this Hegelian philosophy do for your UPSC prep, especially for those tackling the IR optional?
All right, let's break it down for our fellow UPSC warriors. All right, UPSC gurus, let's distill some key takeaways from our Hegelian deep dive.
Okay.
How can you actually use this stuff to rock that IR optional paper?
Well, first, remember Hegel's big idea about the state being an ethical entity?
Right.
This pushes you to go beyond just power struggles between nations.
Okay.
Think about it. When countries clash, it's often about values, norms, ideas of what a just world order should look like.
So it's not enough to just analyze who has the biggest army or the strongest economy.
All right.
We also need to consider the underlying beliefs and motivations driving state actions.
Exactly. For example, when you're analyzing a conflict,
Okay.
don't just focus on the military tactics. Dig into how each side justifies its actions, what principles they claim to be upholding.
Right.
That's where things get really interesting and where you can show the examiners you're thinking on a deeper level.
That's a great tip. It's about showing them you understand the moral and ideological dimensions of international relations,
Yeah.
not just the raw power dynamics.
Now, the second takeaway, remember how Hegel was skeptical of perpetual peace?
Yes.
Well, he was on to something.
Okay.
Conflict is a recurring theme in history.
Right.
It's not going away anytime soon.
So for our UPSC prep, this means we need to understand those root causes of conflict,
Yeah.
the role of power, and how those limitations of international law actually play out in the real world.
You're getting it. Hegel can help you develop that realist perspective that's so crucial for understanding international relations.
Okay.
It's not about being cynical, but about being clear-eyed about the forces at work.
So while we might strive for a more peaceful world, we also need to be prepared for the inevitable conflicts that arise.
Right.
It's about understanding how to navigate that complex landscape,
Yeah.
manage those conflicts, and hopefully steer things toward a more positive outcome.
Now, the third takeaway, the dialectic.
Okay.
This is your secret weapon for analyzing complex historical events and those long-term trends in international relations.
This is where we see those historical patterns.
Mm-hmm.
The rise and fall of ideologies, the shifts in global power dynamics.
Think about it this way. You can use the dialectic to break down pretty much any major development in international relations.
Okay.
Take, for example, the rise of global terrorism.
Right.
You can analyze it as the antithesis to the established world order.
That's a great example. Terrorist groups are challenging the very foundations of state sovereignty and international security.
Right.
Wow.
And the response to terrorism, things like the war on terror, increased surveillance, the strengthening of international cooperation,
Right.
that's part of the ongoing dialectical process shaping the future of global security.
I'm starting to see how this framework can really elevate your analysis and help you craft those insightful, nuanced arguments that the UPSC examiners love.
It's about showing them you can think critically, connect historical events to current trends, and make predictions about future developments. Hegel can help you do all of that.
And finally, remember that Hegel himself was a complex figure.
Right.
His legacy is full of debate and interpretation.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to question his ideas, point out his flaws,
Right.
and offer alternative viewpoints.
The UPSC isn't about blindly accepting any one thinker's perspective.
No.
It's about engaging with those ideas,
Right.
forming your own judgments,
Yeah.
and demonstrating that independent thinking.
Exactly. It's about showing that you're not just regurgitating what you've read, but that you're actively thinking through these complex issues.
So there you have it. Hegel challenging,
Yeah.
thought-provoking,
Yeah.
and surprisingly relevant for anyone who wants to understand how the world works.
And especially for you, our dedicated UPSC aspirants,
Yes.
Hegel's ideas can give you that edge you need to stand out from the crowd.
Remember, it's not just about memorizing facts.
No.
It's about developing that sharp, analytical mind that can grapple with complex issues,
Yeah.
see the big picture, and offer insightful solutions.
So go forth, study Hegel, debate his ideas, and use his insights to craft those brilliant answers that will wow those UPSC examiners.
And hey, while you're at it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like. We'll be back with more deep dives into those brain-bending topics that will help you ace those exams and become the amazing diplomats and IR experts you're born to be. Until next time.